Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moppin coming at you with another APUS government video. This is our second video taking a look at topic 1.8, constitutional interpretations of federalism. Last time we were here we were talking about some of the expressed enumerated powers that the federal government enjoys under the Constitution. This is under section 1, or excuse me, under Article 1. But note, all right, one of the key things to understand about this new thing called the U.S. Constitution is that it's going to give the national government vast powers that just simply didn't exist under the old Articles of Confederation. And that being said, critics of the new Constitution, your anti-federalists, one of their beefs they're going to have is that federal government's got way too much power. It seems like they can do basically anything that it wants at the expense of the states and people's liberty and yada yada yada. Well, that being said, there are some things that are actually enumerated in the Constitution in its original form, pre-amendments, that do attempt to try to limit some of the power of the federal government. And these are what we call the prohibited powers under the Constitution. And that's in Article 1, Sections 9 and 10. These are items that are in writing limits on what the federal government can't do. Now, granted, way more attention is devoted to what the federal government can do, but there are some things right here in Article 1 that take a look at things that the federal government cannot do. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at. And note, I should also make mention that the denial of these powers are not just associated with the national government, but they also deal with state limitations as well. So just keep that in mind. So one of the things that is enumerated is that the government cannot tax exports. Remember, an export is a product that is created in the United States and then sold to a foreign country. So it would be like, pencils made in the United States, and then we're going to sell them to South Africa. The government cannot tax those exports. Now, imports, however, things coming from a foreign country into the United States. For example, think of Colombian coffee beans coming to the United States to be sold. Those things can be taxed, and there's a rich history of using tariffs as a means to protect American businesses and generate revenue for the government. Yada yada yada. But that's different. Imports taxable by the government. Exports not taxable. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, you don't want to be taxing American products that would only serve to harm our economy. Something else that's going to be important are the prohibition of what are called ex post facto laws. So here's a little Latin for you. So ex post facto basically means after the fact. Now, to give you a little context for this, one of the things the ancient Romans used to do, and remember, the founding fathers were very, very obsessed with the old ancient Roman Republic and trying to learn lessons from that republic and take what was good and eliminate what was bad, yada yada. And this is one of those things where they're trying to learn from the mistakes of Rome. One of the things that those Roman senators used to do is, and especially try to go after political rivals, enemies, yada yada yada, is that they would have something that was legal, and then they would outlaw it, and then be able to use this new law they created that outlawed a previous action of somebody, and then be able to penalize them for it, even though it was legal at the time. And so this is a really convenient way to go after your political rivals, steal their property, put them in jail, execute them, whatever. Obviously, this kind of legislation is inherently unfair. And so the founders, realizing that, are going to ban that. So basically what this means is that any action that you take that is legal at the time, the government cannot then go back later and prosecute you for it, even if that action is made illegal in the future. So let's say, for example, that you're 22 years old and you are legally allowed in the state of Ohio to, go buy some beer. Let's say then, and let's say that you do, okay? Then let's say a year later, the government decides that, well, alcohol is a dangerous substance, young people are too immature to handle it, etc. We're going to raise the age to be able to purchase and consume alcohol from 21 to 25. Now, note, all right, at this point in time, if you were to, let's say, because you're now, let's say 23, if you now wanted to go buy alcohol and consume it, that would now be illegal, even though you had bought it and consumed it previously when it was legal. Now, even though you could not buy that product now, given the parameters, the protection under ex post facto law prohibition stipulates that the government cannot then go back and go, we know that you bought and consumed alcohol at 22, and it's illegal now until you're 25. They can't go back and punish you for it because it was legal at the time. So it's an inherent sense of fairness in terms of prosecuting people for possible criminal activity. Some other things that are mentioned that are prohibited. State import taxes. We mentioned a moment ago that the federal government can tax imports, goods coming into the United States, but the states cannot do that. So you can have a federal, import tariff on Chinese steel, but the state of Tennessee cannot have their own import tax on, timber coming from Russia. So states cannot tax imports. Furthermore, states cannot form treaties with foreign countries, nor can they declare war on foreign countries. So what this speaks to is when you look at the ban on imports, taxes, foreign treaties, declarations of war, it's basically saying that anything dealing with foreign relations is strictly under the purview of the federal government, not the states. So you can't have, for example, the state of Vermont forming a military alliance with Canada. Like, not allowed to do that. Furthermore, the state of Florida cannot declare war on Cuba. States don't have that kind of authority, though the federal government could, sign a treaty, an alliance, if you will, with Canada, and could conceivably declare war on Cuba. So that's a distinction, basically saying, once again, the federal government has that foreign policy power. States do not have that kind of power. Now, speaking of states, there are also things that are going to be what we call reserve powers. Reserve powers are going to come not in the original form of the Constitution, but later on in what's going to be in the 10th Amendment. After the Constitution's ratified, we do see, just a couple years later, 10 amendments quickly added to the Constitution. And the 10th Amendment, the last of those, are dealing with state powers. And what the 10th Amendment basically states is that any power that is not automatically given to the federal government, nor expressly denied to the states, is then held by the states or the people respectively. So basically, it kind of fits in that situation of, well, what if there's a power that it's not mentioned in the Constitution? So in other words, it's not given to the federal government, but it doesn't say that the states can't do it. Well, who gets to do it? Well, the 10th Amendment is basically saying, well, the states get to do it. And, think of some of those powers that you're not going to see in the federal government, not mentioned, think of the powers that are not going to be expressly mentioned in the Constitution for the federal government, and are not mentioned to be prohibited against with regards to the states using it. For example, public education is probably the easiest well-known example of that. You can look all through the Constitution, you're not going to see anything regarding public education. So if you're talking about who has the power to, create schools and regulate schools and, stuff like that, determine curriculums, etc., that's not mentioned. So it doesn't say the federal government can do it, and it doesn't say that the state governments can't do it. So per the 10th Amendment, the states get to do it. That's why, you guys are getting a state of Ohio education. It's a state of Ohio curriculum that we are required to teach. Now, notes, all right, you can have subunits that, kind of go a little bit more local, like local school districts, but public education is a state power. And speaking of those more local subunits, any type of local government is the 10th Amendment at work. We know that the federal government has sovereignty. In fact, it has supreme sovereignty per Article 6. But states also have some degree of sovereignty. That's where reserve powers are significant. But note, local governments like, say, the city of Cincinnati, Harlan Township, the Little Miami Local School District, etc. Those do not have sovereignty. They are at the they only exist due to the state governments allowing them to exist, and so that's a 10th Amendment power. Any type of creation, reformation, dissolving, merging, etc. That's all done at the blessing of the state government. So, for example, Warren County only exists because the state of Ohio allows it to exist. The state of Ohio, in theory, could merge Warren County with Butler County if it wanted to. It could split up, Little Miami School District into multiple school districts, or merge it with other districts, et cetera, et cetera. So any type of existence of local government, counties, cities, municipalities, townships, counties, that's all done by the states per the 10th Amendment. 10th Amendment also deals with trade, what we call within a state, or intrastate commerce. So anything that is purely commercial activity within a state is not technically run by the federal government. That's interstate commerce. That's between or crossing state lines. But if it's purely within a single state, then that is a state power. Now, as we'll talk about in other videos, over time, what is interstate commerce has been widely, broadly interpreted. So in reality, there's very little of what we would call true intrastate commerce as far as the courts are concerned. So, short of something really, really unusual, assume that when we're talking about commerce, the federal government's going to have the ultimate authority in terms of regulating it. We also have police power. That's not technically a subunit of government per se, but those police forces exist because the states allow them to exist. So, for example, you're talking about Mainville Police or the Warren County Sheriff's Department, etc. Those don't exist because the federal government created them. Federal government can't create them. Federal government can't destroy them. They only exist because the states allow those to exist. Now, note, depending on the state constitution, etc., the language, etc., it might be a situation where the states basically say local municipalities, local counties have the power to create police departments, and they kind of go from there. But yeah, ultimately, when we talk about things like local government, police departments, fire departments, that's all done at the blessing of the states, especially including things like public education, intrastate commerce. All right, so we're going to go ahead and leave it there for now, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.